He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Credit Risk, a Master of Science degree in Finance and Investment from the University of Cape Town. He's unknowingly extensively published. He's a nerd. And he's published in very, very reputable journals on public debt, sovereign credit ratings, and African economic development. Just recently, in 2025, he was honored by the University of Cape Town by what they call the Conversation Africa Scientific Communication Award for highest research output. Such a mouthful. These young men, furthermore, contribute more often than not to policy development and advising governments and institutions on financial and economic strategies. Funny enough, he still finds time to be a pastor. He holds a diploma in theology. And he is a Zimbabwean national, Zimbabwe ambassador. But most importantly, he's a citizen of the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Misheck Mutize.
I didn't know that my CV has grown that big. But yeah, it's such an honor to be.
Sorry, I forgot something, and I won't be paid if I don't say it. He's also been he's also been not appointed. What is the English word for it? Honored. Yeah, with being one of the 100 most influential in Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, now it has put pressure on me to, to make sense to all of you. Yeah, but Your Excellencies, it's such an honor to be here, to be speaking with you on this subject matter that sounds very technical, or has been sounding very technical for several years. So I joined the African Peer Review Mechanism in January 2020 to spearhead this program. And for me and the team that I work with, just the fact that all of you are here to talk about credit ratings, it's such a massive achievement for us. I think it deserves a round of applause. Yeah, thank you for that. So I think it's very, very encouraging and inspiring, all the things that have been said in the opening statements. So I will not go through some of the pieces that I wanted to, or that I would have said in my initial presentation, just to be economic with time. But in short, I think we have managed to relate that this is a subject that you must pay attention to. I know many of our colleagues care more about money that comes through their pocket, but are not very interested in the theory behind the money, which is much more powerful because that's what determines how much comes to your pocket. So it's an important subject that we need to somehow pay attention to. So I think credit ratings, it's very clear now that it became a topic of importance because Africa had no other alternative besides tapping into the financial market. And in this case, it's the Eurobond market. And most of our Eurobonds are issued in the international financial market. So we couldn't escape ratings because these are institutions that determine the cost of the money. Before you issue any bond, before you transact on any financial market, you need to get a rating from these institutions. That's what makes them powerful. And if they don't give you a gate pass, you won't be able to issue your financial instruments. So this is what led us to where we are kind of African countries submitting to these oligopolies to still get a rating even when we have concerns and we have some of the approaches that I'll articulate for you to perhaps be more convinced that this subject matter is worthwhile. So I think Baraka, take me to the third, yeah. So I've been talking about this cycle for several years now. This is a perfect cycle of how financial market works, at least to relate to the audience. I love what Minister Mutize said. It's a very objective observation. Myself, I've criticized some of our governments when they are acting, in a questionable way, because this also gives impetus to the analysts to say, you see, you criticize us, but look at what your governments are doing. So we have criticized them, especially when they issue Eurobonds to pay other Eurobonds that are maturing at a higher interest rate, which is clearly not sustainable. You can't borrow from a third person to pay another person at a high interest cost. So that clearly shows you that the trend is unsustainable. But looking at some of the driving factors, I think the cycle starts on top, where rating agencies sit. By definition, they say, we give you a credit assessment of how, or the possibility that you will not default on the money that you're borrowing, which is okay. Anyone who has their money, they don't want to give it to someone who will not pay. Is that not correct? Yeah, and the next set of stakeholders is the investors. Investors are after return. And the return to an investor is an interest to those who are borrowing. So they want to maximize their return, is it? Anyone who have money they want to invest, they want to get the most out of it. And for them to determine that, they need a rating to say, you are this risky, so I need to charge you more so that if you don't pay, at least it will compensate or offset the cost of committing. So whenever a rating agency makes pronouncement, investors, be it pension funds, be it portfolio managers or any asset manager, will make adjustments to their portfolio as well as the interest rate. And those adjustments also changes what we call the fiscal space. Any government who is borrowed, they need to pay more if they are downgraded, and they will pay less interest when they are upgraded. So that's why now there's a lot of talk about interest burden in Africa, that it's the fastest growing expenditure component on our budgets, because our governments are borrowed and they keep on borrowing from the same sphere of financial markets for various reasons. But an interesting one has been because the traditional funding sources are no longer as available, and also that Eurobonds are more like an open check. Investors are not very interested on how you are going to spend money that you borrow. And they are not also going to follow up on how much you are using that money, whether responsible or not. Going forward, if those adjustments are made to the negative, that has a direct impact on the fiscal space of the government. Because if a government has to pay more interest, it means there's less money to pay for or to spend on developmental objectives, spend on infrastructure, spend on creating employment. As you know that in Africa, a government is a key player in our economic activities. And that if government is constrained, it's very, very difficult to create economic growth. So that has the direct impact on the real economic sector. And if a government is downgraded, it means that the fundamentals like economic growth, they decline. So that's a perfect cycle. So it's assumed that rating agencies, if they are working perfectly in an utopia world, they are supposed to penalize irresponsible governments, and they are supposed to enforce transparency in how governments operate. But that aside, let me take you through a scenario that I usually give, that social science or the social science sector, it's different from the scientific sector or physical science, for example. If you are talking to a meteorologist, someone who predicts the weather, no matter how reputable they can be, they can develop a sophisticated piece of model to predict the weather tomorrow. If their model, no matter how sophisticated, I know all of us might not be scientists to understand the model that predict weather. If their model predicts that tomorrow there is going to be a storm, we can listen or believe a reputable scientist and wait until tomorrow to see if the storm is going to come. Is that not so? Yes, you don't need to be a specialist to follow that. And come tomorrow, if the storm does not come, we can all make conclusions that the meteorologist was not correct or this model was not accurate. We can all make that judgment. And it means that person's reputation is gone, because the storm does not care about your reputation. It doesn't care that you have been doing this for many, many years and you've gotten it accurate 1,000 times. But come to our social science field, where economists get pride in developing the most sophisticated models, including our rating analyst. Moody's will show you a very complex model with over 50 variables to say this is a very precise model to predict the risk of default. So you are an analyst sitting in Hong Kong or London, or you're sitting in New York, where most of the analysts that analyze Africa sit. And we've always debated this point, that you can't make such prejudicial announcement from that jurisdiction without understanding the context dynamics. You predict that I see dynamics in such a country, and it's my prediction that this country is going to be going through fiscal pressure. If you are an investor, you should be worried about that news. And the most logical thing to do is to adjust your position, because you don't want to make loss. And by adjusting your position, you are either preparing to exit that position, or you want to increase your interest rate. And when you increase the interest rate, it means you are placing the burden on the country, because that's a direct impact on the interest rate. And when that happens, immediately the country begins to be squeezed on its fiscus. When that happens, the ultimate position is the country's fiscus becomes bad or worse and worse. And now an analyst will sit and say, you see, my prediction was correct. But it doesn't mean that your prediction was correct. It means that you are part and parcel of the phenomenon that you are trying to predict. And also, the news that you publish is read by people. And these people are also part of the ecosystem that you are predicting. That's why I always say that financial markets trade opinions. And whoever has got the most credible opinion in that time drives the market. So this is the ecosystem in which the conversation on the establishment of an Africa credit rating agency was conceived. So take me to the next slide. This is a very practical example. Forget everything else, but just look on top. This is about Ghana. 2019, it was on record as the fastest growing economy in Africa. And they were taking an expansionary stance. In other words, they were spending more money in the economy to create jobs and make sure that the economy becomes more active to generate economic growth. I remember the Minister of Finance then, Minister Ken Ofori, was crowned as the most prudent finance minister at one of the platforms. And the following year, there was an economic shock, and Ghana was caught on that stance. And the first to pronounce the possibility of fiscal strain was Fitch, followed by Moody's, followed by S&P. And this happened in a space of a week. Immediately, all the investors pulled out of Ghana. And immediately, there were headlines about Ghana. And the headlines were about the bloodbath of rating downgrades in the country. And everyone turned again to blame the finance minister, because he's the one who was making the choices. And fast forward, you can see in 2023, Ghana was amongst one of the most strained countries. You'd see the city's currency had depreciated over 55%. And most of the loans, the Euro bonds they had taken, on record being one of the first African country to be able to issue a zero coupon bond, which is a complex instrument to issue. In other words, a government will not pay anything until the due date, when that instrument matures. So all those went down the drain, and Ghana was found in a very, very strained position because of the cycle that I explained to you, that analysts contribute to some of the dynamics in the markets because investors listen to what they say. So to a greater extent, we argued that point that it didn't mean that Ghana was, or the minister was irresponsible, or Ghana was in such a bad position. But the circumstances and the dynamics make Ghana's position much, much difficult. Because if everyone wants to pull out of Ghana's exposure, when the money that they want has been invested in medium to long term, it was impossible for the country to be able to sustain that pressure. Let's go to the next one now. Here is a piece of news cutouts from some of the news outlets. I like to make this presentation, then it becomes very practical. It's 3 layers of information or announcements. The one on top, you can see it's, so this is about Kenya. The one on top, you can see it's about a bond buyback. In simple terms is, Kenya, because its major bond maturity was in 2026. So because the market was favorable in July 2023, it made an announcement that we are planning to buy back some of our bonds before they mature, which is actually a credit positive development. Want to buy back this bond so that we can readjust our maturities and contract on a better interest rate. Then a Moody's analyst went on Bloomberg. It's just a conversation with Bloomberg. And he announced that if such an activity happened, because they anticipate that Kenya is doing so, because it's likely undergoing a fiscal pressure. So if that happens, we would treat it as a possible default. Immediately, we'll show you in the next slide the impact of one announcement by an analyst who is in Washington. So if that happens, it's treated as a potential default, ignoring that the bond buyback was a voluntary exercise. Whichever investors who hold the country's bond can choose to exercise that option or not. And the following, so it means after such an announcement, the program was completely derailed. Kenya was not able to adjust its position through the bond buyback. Then come the following year, July, Moody's downgraded Kenya, it's the same analyst, downgraded Kenya on the basis of the, we call it euphoria. There was a protest in Kenya because of a bill that it wanted to pass through Parliament, which was called an e-levy bill. But the irony of this, if it's in Paris, if a protest is in Paris, analysts call it credit positive because it's citizens exercising democracy. So it's democracy at work. But if it's in Africa and there's a protest, the characterization is around social pressure and the presence of a youthful population in Africa putting pressure on government. So it's likely going to go out of control and becomes an uprising all the time. And if you see the dynamics, always you see that around election, there's always negative signals that no matter how smooth an African election is, it's always associated with policy changes risk. But fast forward, the third layer of information you can see, this is 2025. The same analysts come to upgrade Kenya. If the analyst views were accurate as displayed in the beginning, it's very rare for an analyst to come and upgrade an African country after 6 months, because this is 6 months. It has never happened because we have been following this field for some time. So this shows you some of the speculative pronouncement and views that analysts make when they are sitting wherever they are. So just to, okay, let me conclude with the next slide so that you see the impact of such an announcement. You can see that in 2023, the announcement that Moody's made costed the country almost 6 cents per every dollar of the Eurobond that the country was exposed to. And this country had almost 3 billion that it wanted to buy back at that time. And also the shilling lost almost 10% of its value in Kenya. And fast forward, when the upgrade happened, because investors are always cautious, there was no reverse of the loss that had happened prior. So in summation, or in summary, that announcement alone costed, or when the country came back to do the bond buyback successfully in October 2025, it paid over 150 million more in US dollars in an unnecessary interest rate, which could have been avoided if an analyst would have not made such a mistake. So this is the cost that we have been contending with the analysts that have been assessing African countries over this past few years. And most of the elements that they assess are qualitative in nature. And it needs a prerogative of an analyst to assign a number to what they believe works. And this has worked against most of our positions over the years. So let me conclude with a few extracts from some of our publications that we've been putting out, which I think speaks to the whole idea of having an African rating agencies. Starting with aligning what Minister Mutize mentioned, that an African credit rating agency is not going to solve all African problems, because there are some downgrades that are justified and some upgrades also that are justified. So an Africa rating agency is also going to downgrade some African countries when they are supposed to be downgraded. And it's being established not to give favorable assessments to African countries and those that subscribe to it, but also to provide investors with an accurate and context-intelligent assessment to unlock markets, which is very important for future economic activities. And going back to the point that global finance is trade opinions, and it runs on perceptions, and perceptions shape the narratives. And those who control the narratives are the ones that determine the cost of money. And lastly, that financial markets penalize silence much more than it penalizes bad news. And that because if you don't tell your good story, the markets still trade on an old bad one. So let me pause here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mish. I think we can give him another round of applause. Okay.
I think to summarize this and be economic with time, we get asked this question. Last year we were at the IMF meetings, we were at the UN General Assembly. We still ask the question, I think to sum it, that why would global investors believe AfCRA and lend to Africa on the basis of its assessment? Well, my response has been twofold. The first fold is that we don't need international investors to believe in Africa for a start. We need Africans to believe in AfCRA. That's the starting point. Because if we wait for international investors to believe us, that's not going to happen. Remember, you are dealing with Moody's that has been in existence since 1890. And S&P that has been existing since 1910. Fitch has been in existence since 1945. So I like what recently the new president of AfRexim Bank said, that over with the debate of what AfCRA is going to achieve, let's just start it and see how it's going to turn out. So I think that's the attitude that we need to start with. For your information, Africa alone is sitting on over $2.4 trillion in funding, money that is classified as domestic financing. That's a huge sum that actually overlaps beyond the capital gap that we intend to fund. And how this money moves, we all have central banks here. Central banks are required by the Bank of International Settlements to keep over 30% of their reserves in an international offshore account. So that's even if they sell a Eurobond, that money doesn't come to Africa. It stays offshore. And when they do a transaction, that money just moves from one European country to another. That to change, we need to be able to transact on the continent. If we are able to move money within Africa, which we think AfCRA is a key catalyst to allow domestic financial market activity, we eliminate half of our problems to do with interest burden. And talk more of money that is controlled by pension funds that are owned or controlled by governments. The sovereign wealth funds that governments have direct control over. We are not talking about an institution that is sitting in Europe. These funds, if they are moved on the basis of credit assessments of portfolio managers who are managing these funds, there will be a lot of changes, especially on the secondary market that trades African instruments. In the second fold, I would say that even though we are part of the global financial architecture, we are not going to operate outside it. But there are several things that have given me confidence over the years. When we started, people told us that Moody's is not going to listen to you, and Fitch is not going to listen to you. I tell you today, when there is an activity or when there is a significant market movement, almost all the key stakeholders in the global financial architecture are waiting to see what the APRM or African Union is going to say. And that has given us more confidence to challenge the system. And today, as we speak, the issue of the map that the minister has said, it was mentioned in the public arena, I think a day after S&P announced the map or published the map, and they ignored it for 20 days. When AU issued a statement, it was changed the next day. And for us, this is the power that we already have to move the market, and AfCRA is going to ride on that. Not only this, there is the biggest rating agency in Africa in terms of portfolio of ratings is not S&P, it's not Moody's, it's not Fitch. It's one called the Global Credit rating company, which is based in Mauritius and South Africa. Many of you might not know it, but it's the largest rating agency in terms of portfolio of ratings. And investors use it. It's actually the most profitable in terms of revenue size beyond these big three. And most of its revenue comes from commercial ratings, comes from rating municipalities. It comes from, not from sovereign ratings. And a few years back, we challenged this very strongly when it was being acquired by Moody's. If there was no value in this African-based rating agency, there was no reason why Moody's would want to acquire it for so many billions of dollars. So this speaks to the unique capacity and capabilities that an African institution can generate. And to me, I think as you leave this room, I think let's everyone be an ambassador of this agenda, that we need to believe in our own institution. Credibility, I don't deny that it's a function of time, but you can't gain credibility if you're not doing anything. And for this, I think me being a technical person in this, it's what we drove in the African Union when they were debating that this institution should not be outside the African Union. And we said, no. If you establish this institution within the African Union, it's going to be redundant because people are not going to believe what it says. Let this institution be private sector driven, self-funded, and let it be run by professional people. And I think to give you further confidence, as we sit now, I think I've got more than 30 CVs of people who are working in S&P and Moody's and Fitch, who are applying for jobs in AfCRA before it's established. So it shows the power behind the institutions. Who is going to ignore a rating that is issued by an analyst who is former S&P analyst, who has just changed location, but still doing the same assessment? So you want to believe that there is capacity in this, and there are more people who believe in us or who are waiting to listen to us when we go to New York and Washington than they are when we are in Africa. And I think that needs to change. Thank you.